College track and field at its highest level is basically professional level. Notice, I didn't say anything about a division because it really doesn't matter anymore. You can't win an NCAA championship in any of them if you're not good enough to hold your own against the world's best. It's the reason why college athletes from every single division were at the US Olympic trials. And interestingly enough, they did not come alone because high school athletes were there as well. And if you were paying very close attention to the games in Paris, there were college athletes who even came back home with medals. But because everything I just said is simply stating facts, it is also the reason why getting recruited to compete in college is way harder than most people realize. But if I'm gonna be really honest with you, I am tired of watching recruits make the exact same mistakes over and over and over again. I know why it happens because there's a lot of misinformation about what it takes to get recruited. The primary reason for that is because almost nobody is specifically talking to the track and field community. I'm also aware that I am just one man with an opinion, but I believe it is an informed one because I'm the guy who runs the high school national rankings for every single class, and I meet one-on-one with students and families to help them get what they want, which is to get recruited. So if you're watching this video, I am going to assume that is the exact same thing that you want, or at the very least, you want to know just how it all goes down. So here's almost everything I could ever think to tell you bottled up into one video. The secrets of recruiting from a former college coach who doesn't know how to be anything less than honest with you. It's actually just a whole bunch of things that other coaches probably don't want you to know and we're never going to tell you anyway. And to be fully transparent, I'm going to cut in between both old and new footage because I've been doing this for a while now. But if you actually make it all the way to the end of this video and still believe that I have not helped you at all with recruiting, then I dare you to contact me directly on my website because I would like to apologize to you personally, specifically for wasting your time. And to start off, I want you to know that I'm not making any of this up. So here is how I became a former college coach in the first place, because I was a head coach in the NCAA, but then I quit. And I think you will forgive me when I explain the reason why. To understand why I left college coaching, you have to know how I got there in the first place. Because I didn't run track and field most of my life. I actually started as a sophomore in high school. I only ran during the spring outdoor season, from that point until I graduated. But that's because I was playing basketball the whole time. But that's another story for another conversation, because clearly that career didn't turn out as planned. I ran the 100 and the 200, and won a lot of races in my local area. So by the time I broke a school record or two, I figured that I probably belonged at the D1 level. And the truth about that is I was delusional, but barely good enough to sneak my way into Division I as a recruit. But it wasn't easy, because I reached out to over 70 schools via email, and some of them I even hand wrote a letter and mailed it to them. Now stay with me on this, because my recruiting journey has a lot to do with my college coaching career. And after all that, only about 7 schools showed any interest in recruiting me. But they weren't Syracuse, they weren't Duke, and they weren't Miami, because those are the schools I wanted to go to. So allow me to be clear, because when I say I was the bare minimum of good to get into D1, what I really mean is I could have ended up in D2 or D3, and nobody would have noticed. But I eventually committed to Lafayette College, which is still in Division I. And I ran there for 4 years, and I never became an All-American like I planned. But I definitely did improve to be one of the better runners in the Mid-Atlantic region for D1. But all that really means is I got fast enough to maybe make a final, and then lose to athletes like Brendan Rodney, who's now a world champion, by a lot. And all of that led to my coaching journey, where my first job was as a head coach for cross country, and later as an assistant for track and field at the high school level. And I knew nothing about distance at the time, but I studied a whole bunch of books to figure it out. And 3 years later, when I was about to turn 25 years old, I was offered my first head coaching job in the NCAA Division II. But that was for a cross-country only program. And for the record, I was a part-time head coach the entire time. But remember when I said my recruiting journey actually matters? Because by the time I took that job, I had figured out that most high school recruits were just like I was. They didn't know which schools actually wanted to recruit them, and they were struggling to get anyone to pay attention to them. And they probably weren't going to send 70 emails out just to get most of them to be ignored. So as a head coach for a program that was honestly never good at all in the past, and was a track team without track, with barely any scholarship dollars, I recruited 14 men and women to join my team. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I convinced them to come by selling them the dream that my school and my program was the best thing for them, which probably wasn't true. It was just the best thing that they knew about at the time. And you know I wasn't going to tell them that somebody else had a better offer over there if they couldn't figure that out for themselves. So my team got pretty good pretty quickly and had their best performances in school history. So after a couple of years as a part-time college coach and a high school track coach, while juggling another job at the same time, I got tired of doing it all. So I left to work one job that was full-time. But after about a year, I found myself coaching again for a junior college Division III program in track and field. And I did my thing in recruiting again, because by now I had it down to a science. Find the athletes who don't know what's good for them and convince them to join my team. And I pulled it off, transferring in 6 men and women who could help my team compete at the national level. But that track season never actually happened in Outdoor 2020. And by now you probably know why. So when the athletics department shut down for all of 2021, I left college coaching for good. And although I love coaching and believe that I was pretty good at it.
In the 110s because everything goes up, am I right? No, it's not.
The reason why I'm not going back is simple. I was probably a little bit too good in recruiting, because I could convince the right recruit of just about anything, which would get them on campus competing for my team, even if it wasn't what was best for them. And I'm not saying that all college coaches recruit this way, but the ones who win the most do it because they have the best athletes, point blank period. And you can't get good athletes if you can't convince them to commit. So it doesn't matter if I don't have your major, or if the campus really isn't a good fit for you, or even if there's a D1 school somewhere that you would probably love to run at. As long as you don't know it, I can convince you to come here. It's what any good recruiter wants to do. And even if you get a scholarship, it is not about you. It's about them, because they want to win. And that's why I left college coaching, because I couldn't stand to recruit any more athletes and watch them choose a school that might not be the best for them in the long run.
And now that I've gotten that out of the way, it's time to get down to business, because you can't get recruited if you don't actually know what college coaches are looking for. And I could tell you a whole bunch of PRs to hit, as well as the best type of email you can write. And trust me, I'm getting to that. But I also know how college coaches think. And there is something that they're probably not going to tell you, specifically about what types of athletes they actually want on their teams, as well as the type that they are desperately trying to avoid.
So here is the truth about what every college coach is really looking for. Something that not every athlete is willing to do. And it is the reason why more track athletes quit in college than perhaps any other sport, because they're flat out not willing to do it. So let's get down to business, because I don't know how to say this without calling it like it is. In the eyes of a college coach, there are only 2 types of athletes that they are looking to recruit. It is true for every sport, but track and field has something going for it that no other sport does. We use a clock or a measuring tape to assess your performance every time you go out there to compete. That means that you can't hide when you are alone out there on the track. It is just you versus everyone else. So it makes things very clear for a track coach to see what they want to in recruiting, or so you would think. Coaches want to know if you can help their team win, and if they don't think you can, there's really no point in continuing any recruiting conversations. So the only 2 types of athletes that they actually want on their team are the following. Either A, you are that good at the events that you do, so good in fact that you can help their team win right now. Or you are an athlete who actually wants to win that badly. I mean badly enough where you are willing to do whatever you have to do in training to put yourself in a position to help the team win. And here is the secret that nobody ever wants to tell you. Almost no athlete is actually that good in the first place. So that means almost all of the scholarships go to athletes who really are the second one. Just take a moment and think about it. Arian Knighton and Noah Lyles are actually that good, but they didn't go to college in the first place. And Sha'Carri Richardson went to college, but she won the national championship as a freshman the only year she was there. But America has 50 states and only one state champion in each. In states like Florida and Texas, where they've got a lot of talent, they've also got a lot of programs that take track and field seriously. They're not all going to get the state champion in recruiting. When coaches move down the leaderboards and continue to recruit, they need to figure out very quickly who's real and who's not. Kendall Williams was the world junior champion in the 100-meter dash out of the state of Florida as a high school runner. But even an athlete as great as him didn't win any individual SEC conference championships in Division I until his senior year of college. And if I'm gonna keep being honest, the real problem that college coaches keep running into in recruiting is that most high school recruits don't really want to be good at the college level, at least not badly enough. They just want to look good rather than actually being good. And I'm not talking about the color of your spikes or even whether or not you rock a headband. What I'm saying is that they're more concerned perhaps with being the best runner on their high school team, or maybe even their county, than considering what's actually happening throughout all of the levels of the NCAA. Even the Division III 100-meter champion ran 10.13 seconds. He doesn't get a scholarship to do it. The truth without Photoshop, as a head coach in Division II, I didn't really care that much if you were the fastest runner on your high school team. When I was out recruiting, I did find a bunch of kids who actually were, but the best athlete that I ever signed was actually the 5th best runner on his high school team, a team that had won 2 back-to-back state championships. He knew how good he was not, at least not yet. So he worked harder than everyone else, even when he was technically more talented than most of his teammates. Remember, not every college coach is only recruiting state champions. Yes, some have a budget big enough to go internationally and get some of the top athletes. But people like me didn't have it like that. I was looking for recruits with the potential to get better and had the drive to actually pull it off. I would even tell them all the same speech over the phone in recruiting. I would simply tell them, I'm recruiting you in the first place because I believe you can help my team win. My success is your success. It's really not about you though. It's about me because I want to win. That means I have to coach you every single day with the goal of winning championships in mind. And if you don't want to be on a team where I'm going to push you that hard, don't come here. Go find somewhere else to run. I was hoping to weed out the athletes who would eventually quit the team. And for the most part, that speech actually worked. But you still don't have to believe me, because the evidence is all around us. Even the most talented of track recruits are not going to make it at the college level if they really don't want it that badly. Tamars McCallum was the fastest high school sprinter in the 100-meter dash in 2022, and then he signed with Tennessee in the SEC Conference, where he didn't qualify for a conference championship final in any individual event as a freshman. If that can happen to the best, what do you think is going to happen to the rest of the recruits? He might dominate the NCAA someday, but it's going to take a lot of hard work before that day actually comes. A day when he runs faster than he ever ran when he was in high school to do it. Melissa Jefferson, on the other hand, was nowhere near one of the fastest girls when she came out of high school. But now, she's an NCAA champion and a USA champion. She did all that at Coastal Carolina University because she found a coach who believed in her and her potential and her work ethic just as much as she did. Please don't get me wrong. Most high school athletes like winning and getting accolades, but they tend to do it at the expense of actually seeing what their potential is. Answer this question. Would you rather win a meet, but run far below your personal best, or actually run a PR, but be far away from winning on that day? If you answered with option 2, then you might actually be what college coaches are looking for, because that is most likely going to be your experience when you get to the college level. That's the real reason why some recruits go on to quit, because they can't handle losing. Sometimes, a lot of the time, but that's on the path to eventually getting the victory. The only way you can work towards it is if you don't give up along the way. And college coaches actually know this. They want athletes who can handle the grind. It is that, along with your talent, that gets a college coach to believe in you. And besides, the coaches really aren't recruiting the athlete you were in high school anyway. They are recruiting the athlete you will become when you're wearing their uniform.
Now, I do want to be clear that I am aware that most recruits who want to go D1 are really thinking about the most popular programs. And trust me, if that is what you want, I am here to help you get it. But honestly, there's no way for me to do that if I don't keep it a buck with you. So I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off right now. When I talk to recruits who say they want to go Division I, most of them really mean the power conference programs. You know exactly who I'm talking about. It's the same programs that you see on television the few times that track and field actually gets there. Schools like LSU, Texas, Florida, Arkansas, or even USC. And every single school I just mentioned, except USC, is a member of the SEC Conference. So before I go any further, allow me to address this part. The SEC Conference for Division I is just professional track and field disguised as college athletics. There are a whole lot of reasons for that, but we gotta get that part on the board. On average, those programs have the biggest budgets, not just for their recruiting, but also for their resources. So everybody wants to go there, because if you do take an official visit, you're probably going to be impressed with whatever you see. The Florida Gators by themselves have been dominating the men's side at the NCAA championships for the better part of the past decade. They have won the national title more often than not. That means that in the SEC Conference alone, you cannot recruit and realistically compete to win a conference title without having the same type of talent that could threaten to win the national title. And on the women's side, USC is the only program since 2018 to finish in the top 2 spots at the NCAA championship meet outdoors. That was not a member of the SEC Conference. As far as the conferences go, the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big 10 are the best conferences in all of Division I. So if you want to go to a big-time program, I totally get it if that's where you want to end up. No disrespect to the ACC. I'm just going to be honest. They are not on the same level, at least not top to bottom. But the real question is not whether or not you want to go to one of those schools. That's fine if you're like all the other high school recruits who want to go there. That puts those programs in the driver's seat, because when everybody wants to go to the same place, and I'm the coach, I get to choose whoever I want to join the team, and I've got limited spots. There's a lot that I could say about the old rules, about who gets on those rosters and why, but going forward, the NCAA is going to put roster caps on all the programs I just mentioned. The power conference schools are all going to opt in to a new system where they only get 45 athletes on the team. Some of them are going to have to cut athletes who are on their rosters right now because next year, they just won't have room for them. If you are a recruit and you want to go there, getting recruited into those conferences is going to be even harder than it's ever been. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCArecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation and help student athletes who want to be recruited to get exactly what they want. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section because I try to read them all. But I do want to help you get what you want. So I'm going to tell you exactly what those schools are looking for in a recruit. Generally speaking, they are looking for 5-star level recruits. Remember, SCArecruiting.com will tell you who those athletes are. I'm not saying that they won't have some 4-star recruits on their teams. They're going to have some. Otherwise, they couldn't fill out a 45 athlete roster. They just don't want those athletes. They actually want to recruit the 5 stars. Any high school recruit who is performing at the high 4-star level and up, at the very least, 85 overall on the SCA Recruiting national list. They're probably going to be ranked on a national leaderboard inside the top 10 for at least one event. In the off chance that they're not, they're probably still top 10 at the very least in their class in one event. And beyond that, If for some reason that's still not true, they're probably ranked inside their class, at least in the top 25, for multiple events. What I'm really saying is that simply being a state champion doesn't necessarily mean that those types of programs are going to recruit you in D1. And the secret that nobody really wants to talk about for the highest levels of D1 is that you're not just competing with the other athletes in America to get a scholarship in the first place. The top programs don't care at all where they have to go to find talent. As long as you can help them win, they will put you in their uniform. Before Julian Alfred's historic 100-meter dash victory during the Paris Olympics, she competed for the University of Texas. When you were watching the games, she was running for St. Lucia because that is where she's from. Texas recruited her from there, and quite a few of her teammates, whom she led to win an NCAA outdoor title in 2023, like Rafidat Adeleke, also are international. She competes for Ireland, who was there in the Olympic final for the 400. To be real with you, if I'm an NCAA head coach and winning an NCAA title is my ultimate goal, and I find out that there's an international athlete in Ireland, St. Lucia, Jamaica, or anywhere else who can come to my program and help me win, I'm going to put them on the roster unless you prove that you're even better. So if you really want to get a spot on one of those teams, remember, getting a scholarship is an entirely different conversation that I'm not getting into right now. You're probably going to need to be an athlete who, at the very least, if you're just looking for benchmarks, is competing at major high school championships, like the New Balance Outdoor National Meet, maybe the Nike Outdoor National Meet, or maybe the USA Track and Field Junior Championship Meet for athletes under 20 years old while you're still in high school, and you are a threat to make a final. Then you might be the type of athlete that those programs are looking for. And if you get there, you should be aware that everybody else on the team is going to be incredibly talented just like you are. At the biggest college track meets of the year, basically, all the fast athletes get together on one track. So if you are one of those athletes and you go to one of those big time programs, be aware that when all the fast people get together on one track, somebody's going to have to look slow. In fact, a lot of somebodies are going to look slow, whoever's not in front. And I can't even pretend I'm completely answering the question if I don't say this part. The bare minimum of good as a recruit that the top level programs, the power conference programs might be willing to accept, is normally going to be a low 4-star recruit, an 80 overall on the SCA recruiting national list. That tiered rating goes to any athlete who has at the very least broken the first team national elite list on mile split in one event. They might not be ranked on the national leaderboards for the top 25 of their class, especially if they're a junior or a senior, but they don't have to be. They're still one of the better athletes at almost any high school meet that they go to, at least in their state. If you need an example, just consider a high school boy who runs the 100-meter dash as a junior, and maybe runs 10.52 seconds when legal. That would be 80 overall recruit rating status, and the bare minimum of good that somebody in the power conferences might consider for a roster spot. I'll be honest, I don't think scholarship is really the discussion they'll be having, but you could probably get a uniform from somebody. If that is not your level at the moment, then now you know exactly what type of performances you need to put out in order to get those schools to take you seriously. And remember, just because you are a high-level performer doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come knocking at your door. The 5-star athletes almost always get found by the top programs anyway, but almost everybody else, even the 4-stars, might need to reach out first to let a college know they're interested. Just be aware that when all the fast athletes get together on one track, somebody's going to have to look slow. I did not share all of that just to discourage you. I did say that I was going to rip the band-aid off. These are just the facts. The most popular programs in D1 are very hard to get into. Of course, it's going to work out for some recruits, but definitely not everybody. And what most people don't realize is that even if you get what you want, it may not be at all how you thought it would be. And now I have to explain the real reason why. For all this to make sense, you have to understand the extent to which all of the top recruits go to the same schools. Right now, at the time I'm recording this video, the men of Texas Tech have 5 sprinters in the 60-meter dash, ranked inside the top 16.
4 of them are in the top 10. And that means that if the NCAA meet started today, 5 of the 16 men on the starting list would go to one college. I'm not even going to mention how they have more than one hurdler ranked inside the top 10, but I guess I just did. And their women are doing the exact same thing, with 3 ranked inside the nation's top 6. But what I neglected to mention is that 5 of the 8 athletes that I just described came to Texas Tech as transfers, either from JUCO or somewhere else in D1. Remember, I tried to give you one school and one event, so you can pretty much reverse engineer what their recruiting plan actually is now. Shout out to them and their coaches for pulling that off, but I'm just getting started. In the men's mile, Northern Arizona, Washington, BYU, and UNC all have multiple men ranked inside the top 20 for the nation. Together they account for 11 men on that list, with 4 of them going to Washington alone. I'm not making this up. All the best runners are on the same teams, and I know what you're thinking. I guess they must have the best coaching, right? Well, whether or not that's true, we'll never actually find out, because all those athletes were ranked higher than almost everyone else before they got there. The biggest name programs in D1 are also the schools that everybody wants to go to. USC and all the other big names already know this, so of course it works to their advantage in recruiting, just like it does in every other sport. But hang with me for a moment, because track and field, like I said, is different. But that is the reason why 8 of the top 100 girls recruits in the class of 2024 are committed to USC alone. They also have 2 more ranked outside the top 100 to go along with 4 inside the top 20. And yes, that is great news for them, but you have to understand what's wrong with this picture. Men's track teams only have 12.6 scholarships in total for the entire roster. Women actually get 18. Regardless of how you feel about it, it's simple math that all of the athletes I'm describing can't be receiving full rides. If they were, then more than half the scholarships would be gone for just the freshman class alone. This is my first reason why track and field recruiting gets way harder than it needs to be, because almost all of the recruits are trying to go to the same schools in the same conferences. On the men's side for the class of 2024, the Tennessee Volunteers have already committed 12 of the top 300 boys on the SCA national list. It's technically 14 athletes if you count the ones who play football, but 12 athletes is an entire scholarship roster for just the freshman class. Allow me to repeat myself. They are not all getting full rides. So schools like them basically are hoarding all of the talent. But now the real question is why. It's actually pretty hard for track and field coaches to identify all of the talented recruits who belong in Division I. Unlike almost every other NCAA sport, like basketball, softball, or even volleyball, there's no one place that D1 coaches can go to see all of the recruits that they would actually want. In all those other sports, there are very large tournaments with hundreds upon hundreds of athletes. That means that even if you're a 2 or 3 star level recruit, you get a chance to perform in front of college coaches. But for track and field, the only national level competitions that bring athletes together basically only let in the 5-star recruits and some of the 4-star recruits. Like I said, only some of them. To clarify, I'm not talking about stuff like the Junior Olympics when an athlete is like 12 years old, because that doesn't count. You're not a legit D1 recruit till you actually put out performances that would make you one. But if a 14-year-old girl breaks 12 seconds in the 100, she is clearly now on the radar for somebody in D1. So any college coach can find all the 4 and 5-star recruits very easily. But when it comes to the 3 and 2-star recruits, the struggle gets real. They're not gonna pop up at random high school invitational meets to look at 2 or 3 athletes. They're only gonna make the trip, realistically, if they know there's a bunch of athletes there who they actually want. So for the coaches who rely on those recruits, because all the rest of the talent overcrowd themselves into the same few schools, they basically have to take what they can get in recruiting because they can't find everybody. And every year, there's almost always a recruit on the board who is better than the person they took. Don't get me wrong. If you're good and you just reach out to them, they'll be more than happy to recruit you. But if you are a recruit who's even at 3-star level
in a state like Montana, and you're just sitting around waiting for D1 schools to hit you up. It's probably not gonna happen. And what this problem has produced is a talent gap, where some conferences that hoard all of the talent have athletes who barely ever get on the track, who could compete for conference medals somewhere else in D1. To keep it a buck with you, a college coach at any high-level program knows that the athletes that they really expect to win anything are receiving scholarship dollars. So if you are a low-level 4-star recruit and you want to go to the SEC, you can probably get a uniform from somebody in there. But your chances of even competing at the SEC conference meet might be slim to none. Forget about even trying to make the final. You don't have to believe me. Just check the numbers. At the time I'm recording this video, the 25th ranked sprinter in the 60-meter dash for the SEC ran 6.77 seconds. It is safe to say that if he does run in the prelims, he is not making the finals this year. But that same time would also make him the conference leader in the Division I NEC conference, which is actually a thing. So the same athlete, who's essentially useless for the team he's on in the conference they compete in, could win it all somewhere else. So my second real problem with talent hoarding is not just that it hogs all of the talent and keeps it in a few schools. It keeps those same talented athletes, who likely aren't getting any scholarship dollars, away from other schools in D1 that would be more than happy to have them and develop their talent to compete at the highest level. The only real way to improve in track and field is to get opportunities to compete. But your spot on the bus to whatever meet they're headed to this weekend is the first thing that's gonna go if you're not one of the best athletes on most teams at the high levels of D1. And when all those athletes get jammed up at a school where they don't get a fair shot to compete, they get upset, and now they can hit the transfer portal. But they also often transfer to another school that isn't really that different from the same one that they left. If I were a D1 coach right now, I would do the same thing. Hoard all of the talent, even if I don't use it all, because as long as I have it, you don't. And that is the real reason why the same schools seem to keep winning everything. I know that the athletes I'm not even using right now could go somewhere else in D1 and be coached to a place where they might even beat the ones I've got on the track at the moment. What this looks like when you are a recruit is that the 5-star athletes go to the same few schools that dominate in any particular event, perhaps as they should. But 4-star recruits, and I'm really talking about the lower ones, crowd into those same schools, even if they have to do it without a scholarship. 3-star and 2-star recruits, as a result, get lost in the shuffle. They don't really know where to go because the schools in the SEC and the Big Ten tell them that they're not interested. And I don't know how to say this part without it coming out harsh, so I'm gonna just come out and say it. Most of those recruits get taken advantage of in recruiting. They might end up in D1, but they could also end up in D2, D3, or even NAIA. No offense to anyone who goes there, but if you are a 2 or 3-star recruit at the end of your junior year who wants to go D1, you can do it. And if it doesn't happen, there must be a coach somewhere in D1 who ended up taking a recruit who wasn't quite as good as you were. And they know this because they're gonna see you at some invitational meet later in your career. The only difference is you'll be ahead of whatever athlete they had while wearing a non-D1 uniform. A 3-star recruit is normally an athlete who shows up to state championship meets, probably in the final, but normally doesn't win it all. And 2-stars normally can win a league, county, or even regional championship. But if they do make the state championship, they're normally not a serious threat to make the final or win the whole thing. When the 5-star kids are off the board, the best recruiters in D1 make their living by finding athletes who don't really know what's good for them. And that's how they convince you that their offer is the best one available, even if it comes with no money. Smaller programs don't have the resources to find every 2 and 3-star recruit whom they would actually want, especially if you're not in their state.
I know that was a whole lot to take in at one time, and trust me, I'm going to give you solutions to all of this. I just don't believe it's fair to try to give you a solution if you don't really understand just how bad the problem actually is to begin with. And unfortunately, there is one more huge lie that screws up the recruiting game for everybody. And when I say everybody,
I am including the colleges too. I'm aware that I now have to explain why I said that track and field recruits have been lied to for so long. It's because recruiting for our sport isn't that much different from all the others, like football and basketball, once you really get down to the details. But unlike those sports, we've never had legitimate national recruit rankings for people to go off of. At least not up until recently. And beyond that, we don't have full ride scholarships for the entire roster to give out. Just consider that for college basketball, ESPN ranks whom they believe to be the top recruits in the nation, and they make it clear who they believe are the 5 stars. In the boys class of 2024, there are literally only 19 names that they consider to be 5-star level. On the women's side, they actually told us it was 31. But in college football, a sport where they give out 85 full-ride scholarships at the FBS level, they still only said 23 boys throughout all of American high schools were 5-star recruits. That means almost nobody you know personally is a legit 5-star. Even the best player in football or basketball for most states is still a 4-star level recruit at best. But this makes sense when you consider that 5-star recruits are expected to dominate at the D1 level the moment they get on campus. If you still need more context, just consider that Sha'Carri Richardson would have been a legit 5-star recruit, the best sprinter in the class of 2018. There's no real need for me to fill you in on all that she's accomplished after that. But Kennedy Flannel was arguably the second best sprint recruit in that class. And if you don't recognize that name, it's probably because she never finished higher than 3rd in any individual event for her entire college career. Don't get me wrong, she did win a Big 12 title. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the drop-off is serious from the best 5-star recruits even to the second tier. Remember, a 5-star athlete is someone who can help a D1 team compete for a national championship immediately once they get on campus. And that is exactly what Jamezia Ford is doing right now. Interestingly enough, Shanti Jackson was technically the best sprint recruit in her class, and she was the only freshman sprinter to compete in 2 individual events at the indoor NCAAs. On the men's side, literally not one freshman made the NCAAs in the 60 or the 200-meter dash. So when I keep telling you there's really only about 45-star level recruits in all of the events in a class, it should make sense now. But without this ranking system for years, the only thing we really had to go off of was who was winning national level events through AAU, USATF, and even organized through the high schools. All 3 of those competitions were handing out All-American status to just about anybody who made an event final. If you do the math on that, that could be as many as 24 recruits in any single event. Of course, they all probably thought they were basically 5-star level, but that's not how a college coach thinks. You are not a 100-meter runner, or a shot putter, or even a long jumper. Best case scenario, you are a sprinter, a jumper, a hurdler, or a thrower. That means we're looking at what you can do across multiple events. The fewer events you are actually good at, the better you have to be in any one of them to give value to a college coach. And I'm not just saying this part because I used to be one, but college coaches are also pretty good at their jobs when it comes to recruiting. Because the truth is that scholarship money is pretty hard to come by. In fact, many D1 teams aren't even fully funded to use all the scholarships that the NCAA allows. Coaches can figure out who the best recruits are even without a 5-star ranking system to go off of. Just put yourself in the mind of Coach Mike Holloway of Florida for a moment. When he goes out to recruit, he's trying to win at the SEC level and beyond. So which recruit would you rather have? The one who's ranked number 5 in the nation and maybe number 15 in the nation in 2 different events? Or another athlete who's ranked number 1, number 3, and number 8 in 3 events? If you're comparing them within the same class, it's pretty simple to know which one you want more. That is why they signed the top recruit in the SCA Top 10 for the class of 2024. And it's also why their conference rival signed recruit numbers 2, 3, and 4. Yes, all 3 of them still from the SCA Top 10. They've all proven to be basically the best in the nation in more than one event. And that is what you have to do if you really want to be a 5-star recruit. And it's also true that most of the 5-stars are going to want to go to the same schools in the same conferences. So when there's more than 300 D1 programs that compete in track and field, most of them already know they're not getting any 5-stars on their team. So if you don't fit the description of a 5-star recruit, you still probably have a whole bunch of options to get recruited in D1 anyway.
There can only be one national champion in any given event, but there's over 30 conference champions in those same events every single season. Whether you are a 5-star or not, or if the SEC is recruiting you or not, the only thing that matters is that you find a coach who is committed to helping you reach your full potential. Parker Valby was technically only a 4-star recruit when she left high school, albeit she was also on the higher end, and she's now a multiple-time NCAA champion, and she's broken a bunch of records along the way. But Kalen Walker was only a high-level 2-star recruit when he came out of high school. But now, he is an NCAA All-American, and the silver medalist indoors in the 60-meter dash. Even Salif Mane was a baseline 3-star recruit at the end of his junior year, which is probably why he committed to Fairleigh Dickinson University. Yes, it's actually in D1, but he is now an NCAA first-team All-American, even if you don't know which school he competes for, and he's done it more than once. Rankings don't mean anything after the gun goes off in college. They won't run the races for you, and they definitely won't win you a national title. But they do make a big difference on who commits to what colleges and why. After all, college coaches need to go off of something to make a decision on who they're going to give the money to.
No matter who you are, and especially if you're new to my channel, I do have to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. And yes, I'm Coach Rob, the founder of SCARecruiting.com, where I rank the best track and field recruits across the entire nation in every event. That said, if you think you need help getting recruited, you are probably right. On SCARecruiting.com, you can get a ton of resources, like my free recruiting guide, detailed videos, online courses, and much more. And if nothing else, and you just really want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. I could keep on going about all the problems in recruiting, but I think you get the point. So instead, I am now going to give you about everything that I can to help overcome them. Because the recruiting game does sometimes feel rigged, but you can use that information to your advantage.
College track and field comes down to 2 goals for any team. First, the head coach has to set goals for their conference performance. Some of them want to win their conference every single year, so they set out to do that. Teams like Arkansas in the SEC, they clearly focus their energy on recruiting all the athletes who they believe will help them win their conference. But that's not what every coach is doing, because some don't even have that as part of their plan. And I'm not saying any names, but you can figure out who they are really quickly, because they always finish near the bottom of their conference. But the second goal that coaches have is to compete for national recognition. That means they need to recruit athletes who are good enough to qualify for national competitions, and then get those athletes to score points in those competitions when they show up. Simply put, college coaches really want to recruit athletes who are first-team national elite on mile split, normally in more than one event. Those are always the athletes whom they believe are a safe bet to get them in the national conversation. Keep in mind, just getting on the elite list doesn't mean you're going to nationals. If a high school boy runs 21:50 in the 200, he's technically first-team national elite, but he's still a long way off from the NCAA championships in D1. He's just good enough right now for the coach to take a chance on him, because he might drop a full second and then get fast enough to have a shot to actually make it in the meet. All you have to do is be one of the athletes whom I mentioned a while ago in this video. You just have to be an athlete who's good enough to help that team compete in their conference championship. If you can prove that to a college coach, they will recruit you. If your high school performances right now are good enough to rank you anywhere near the top 8 performances in any conference, you should likely be a top recruit for some of the schools in that conference. And that's even if the coach doesn't call you first. Because I promise you, there are some 400 runners right now in California who aren't fast enough to get the attention of Stanford, who is now in the ACC, or even USC, who's headed to the Big Ten. But those sprinters are good enough to get the attention of Bucknell University, who competes in the Patriot League, which is still in D1. But Bucknell is in Pennsylvania, and they can't fly to California just to recruit those kids. But if they reach out first, and they find out that they run 48s and 49s in the 400, they will do whatever they can to give them the best possible package. So there are a whole bunch more D1 offers to get than most people realize. But I have to address one more major misconception, because when it comes to AAU and USATF track at the high school level, there is a benefit to doing it. But that benefit is to train with a really good coach who can help you improve your performances in those events. And I need to be really clear about this. It's the training and the coaching that allows you to produce the performances that creates the value out of either of those. Because college coaches really don't care that much where you are and when you run your fast times. They just want to know that you can do it and be able to verify it. When I was in high school, I didn't really run club track and field for long. But for the brief moment that I did, I met another sprinter, and he attended the USATF Junior Olympics. And I'm not saying any names, but the funny thing about it is he did not get offered any scholarship money to run track in college. He eventually walked on at the low D1 level, and I don't really know what happened to him after that. I'm just gonna assume that he walked off the team, because he wasn't on that roster for long either. The reason he didn't get a bunch of money is because he wasn't really that fast. So getting to the Junior Olympics is irrelevant unless you run fast enough to get somebody's attention when you get there. So if you only run for your high school, then that is just fine, as long as you drop the times that a coach wants to see, and then reach out to them to make sure that they actually see it. That's all that you really need to do to get coaches to take you seriously and recruit you. Because I'm trying to tell you that college coaches don't care that much where the talent is. They just want to know how to find it. Hopefully, a lot of it. And they know how to find the athletes on MileSplit's first team elite list. They line them all up and put them on one webpage. But that's not gonna be most recruits, and they know that part too. So my advice is simple. If you have the performances to compete in any Division I conference, and the internet will help you figure that out, then let the coach know that by filling out a questionnaire or even sending a proper email. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by making the first move. If you've ever wondered how talented athletes end up in Division II and Division III, I'm gonna tell you how. It's simple. Those athletes were probably a cut below what the high-level D1 schools were looking for, so they didn't reach out to them. And then that kid sat and waited for somebody to contact them. Because they didn't know, a bunch of D1 schools would want them if they knew that they existed. It was a D2 school, or maybe an NAIA school, or even a Division III school who swooped right in and convinced them to commit.
What I hope you're getting from all of this is that you can make the first move in recruiting by reaching out to schools directly. The coach will even be glad you did it if you are the type of recruit that they were looking for in the first place. But I also know that walking on is an option you could try to pursue. But before you do, I am begging you to consider if that is really the best option you have available.
You actually don't need a scholarship at all to become a legitimate recruit. You just need a coach to show interest in you. But if you are a true walk-on, here is the problem. The coach never asked you to join the team, so they honestly don't really want you on it. Simply put, trying to walk on to a college team, specifically in Division I, is like trying to attend a job interview when you are not invited to one. It doesn't matter at all what you think you can do for their team, because they didn't really want you there in the first place. As a recruit back in high school, I really wanted to run for Syracuse University, which used to be in the Big East, but now they're in the ACC. But their coach was honest with me that I would be a walk-on, and I chose to go to Lafayette, where they actually wanted me. But a high school rival of mine did choose to go to Syracuse as a walk-on, but he spent most of his career watching the team bus ride off to the meet without him. but he did get to run at the conference meet in the prelims one time. Think of it from a head coach's perspective. When I coached in Division II, I had to manage a team budget for team gear, travel, food, lodging, and everything else that we had to take care of. For me to travel anywhere with a walk-on is an extra meal, an extra seat on the bus, an extra hotel bed, and an extra everything else that I have to spend for. And I've got to come up with all of this for somebody who's not going to help my team win at all. In track and field, I can leave you back on campus and nothing is going to change on the results. So that's exactly what happens to many walk-ons. Some track teams, even in D1, might let you walk on, especially if you're a really good student. But that doesn't mean they're going to let you travel to most of the competitions. That's because they want to save money. If you do start to compete better than the athletes ahead of you, then you can earn yourself a seat on the bus. But how can you possibly do that if they barely give you a chance to compete to begin with? Eventually, most walk-ons quit to push themselves so hard in practice just to watch the team bus ride off without them. So if you are serious about competing in college track and field, you need to identify a college coach who actually wants you. And fortunately for you, it ain't that hard to do, because college coaches actually want to find you. To know if a coach might want you isn't that hard, but it does require a little bit of math. You can search up any college track team on the website TFRRS. What you need to click on is the performance list for the conference that that team is in. And remember, college coaches are recruiting athletes to help them score points. So even if you think you'd be the best on their team, it doesn't mean anything in recruiting if they're not focusing on that event. If your high school personal best is within 5% of the performance for whoever finished in 8th place at the conference meet, which is the last point scoring slot in Division 1, that means you probably have a shot at getting recruited. The 8th ranked runner in the men's 400 meter dash in the SEC was 45.11 seconds. So if you are a high school junior who is at least 5% away from that, or better, that's 47.4 seconds, you have a shot to get recruited to the SEC. But the team and the conference matters a whole lot, because in the Patriot League, which is still a Division I conference, runner number 8 is only 48.15. That means if you just run 50.5 in the 400 as a junior in high school, you still might have a chance to get somebody to recruit you. Everybody doesn't want you on their team, but that's fine, because somebody really does. One of my former college teammates walked onto the team, but he wasn't there for long. He figured out pretty quickly that the coaching staff didn't care that much about him, but he didn't quit, because in his words, he walked onto the team, and as a result, he walked off. So you don't have to believe me. Just take it from a man who knows. No matter what, you don't want to be a walk-on unless you're comfortable watching the team bus ride off almost every weekend without you.
The beautiful thing about D1 track and field is that there are over 300 teams out there. So if you are at least a 2-star recruit and you really want to go D1, you can probably find a spot somewhere at that level. But you will need to get familiar with all the D1 teams that you've probably never seen on TV. And believe it or not, going to one of those schools could be the best decision you ever made in your career, and this is why. There are over 30 conferences in Division I track and field, and they are definitely not all the same. But the only conferences that most recruits want to pay attention to are the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC. I could mention the Pac-12, I guess, because it's coming back in some type of form. But I'll be honest, with the teams they got on the list right now, ain't nobody checking for them in track and field. At least not on the same level anymore as the 4 conferences I just mentioned. I am not here to argue that the schools in the big conferences aren't a great opportunity for some recruits to go in track and field. But I am focusing on all the other conferences that mostly get ignored right now. There is elite level talent in every single Division I conference, as well as high level coaching represented in every single conference. Just because a school has a big name doesn't mean the coach is actually better. It just means that they have a program that maybe has a bigger budget. If as a recruit, you would rate as a 2-star, 3-star, or even a low 4-star on SCArecruiting.com, then you likely should be paying attention to the other conferences in D1, not just the big named 4 that I mentioned. I'm pretty sure that almost no recruit wants to go to college and not have big PRs. And if your goal is to compete at the highest level you possibly can, if you're not already a high 4-star level recruit and beyond, you're going to need a good coach who's committed to helping you get there. Almost every head coach in Division 1 recruits first with their focus on winning their conference. That means they're looking for athletes who will score inside their conference. Once they've established that, they can focus on developing you beyond that. But if you're an athlete who they don't think has a chance of helping them in the conference, you're probably an athlete they're not focused on at all. Almost the worst thing that can happen to any recruit is to end up at a program where the coach is not focused on developing your talent. You are not going to put out PRs if that is not the coach's goal when they're training you. And I don't know how to say this part without it coming out harsh, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Developing talent is a luxury, not a necessity. If I'm a head coach, or for that matter, any coach on the staff, it would be nice if my athletes ran PRs. It's just not essential for me to win. If I can get athletes who are fast enough to show up and show out without me doing much. Simply put, the biggest name programs in D1 are able to get those athletes, the ones who show up immediately and can run their high school PRs and show up at the national championship meets. But the majority of the D1 coaches for almost every other program in the smaller conferences, those coaches make their living by developing talent. At the Olympic trials in 2024, there were athletes from schools like Campbell University, as well as the Naval Academy. Notice, I said the word athletes with an S on the end. That means plural. Nobody thinks of either of those schools as track and field powerhouses, but they develop talent, enough of it, for those athletes to get all the way to the Olympic trials. And I am willing to bet that those same athletes would not have been recruited by the biggest name programs anyway. And even if they somehow got on the roster, their coaches wouldn't have been focused on developing their talent to get to that level. And there are schools that qualify for the NCAA championships that almost nobody ever expects to make it in a relay. In the women's 4x1 alone, in 2024, Howard University out of the MEAC Conference, as well as Charlotte out of the American Conference, and the University of Pennsylvania from the Ivy League, all qualified through to the NCAAs. You should never assume that a smaller D1 program simply can't compete with some of the bigger ones. And on top of that, you should also never assume that you are too good to compete in a smaller level conference. The right conference level for any recruit is likely going to be to end up at a place where you can try to score points at your conference championship meet immediately, but probably not be winning a medal when you get there. A good coach should be able to get you from simply being competitive to competing to potentially win the conference. And once you do, the next thing they're going to focus on is how you can try to take on the best in the nation at the regional meet and beyond. And what really makes track and field so special is the team aspect anyway. So if your choices are potentially maybe going to a bigger name conference program that normally is not that competitive to win that conference, and potentially going to a smaller one that does compete to win their conference, you should probably take it seriously. Winning is definitely a whole lot more fun than losing. And the only thing better than winning individually is winning with your entire team. That is what head coaches in college track and field are actually trying to do. We might view track and field as an individualized sport, but I promise you, that is not how it functions for a head coach in Division 1. If you're looking to get recruited by any Division 1 program, you should probably take a look at the SCA team ranking list for NCAA D1. They're the list for the men's teams, as well as for the women's teams. I actually do it for both indoor and outdoor track and field separately. Those rankings exist to show you who the most successful teams are, based on who they compete against and who they actually beat. And notice I said the word team. I didn't just say individuals in a specific event. It's how I know that the women of Albany dominate their conference as well as their region, even if most people don't pay attention to them. And Youngstown State on the men's side does just about the exact same thing. The beautiful thing about track and field is that the lanes on a track don't discriminate. They don't care what uniform you're wearing or what conference you represent. Once you go out there, Your performances are your performances, and the team logo by itself is not going to make you any faster, because I'm pretty sure that the boys who sprinted for Campbell in 2024 and later ended up at the Olympic trials are very happy with the decision they made to run for the Campbell Fighting Camels instead of whatever other big name program they might have had their eyes on. What matters is that if you're at least a 2-star recruit and up, you are probably a top recruit for at least somebody in Division 1. The only question is whether or not you will find who that school is, because you might have to reach out first in order to start that conversation. I recognize I've spent most of my time talking about D1, but I also know that D3 programs are way more competitive than most people give them credit for. If you're not at the very least a legitimate 4-star recruit, you could probably find some very great options to consider at that level, even though almost nobody ever tells you that. I know what you're thinking, that D3 track and field can't hold a candle to the D1 level. But that is a lie that I am prepared to call out, and here is the evidence. Individually, any athlete who is a D3 All-American right now could win a conference championship somewhere else in D1. Sam Blaskowski is proof of this, because he won the D3 National Championship in the 100-meter dash, and he ran 10.13 seconds when he did it. He could not only win conference meets in a bunch of places in D1, but he would have a legitimate shot at making the D1 NCAA championship. In fact, he went to the USA indoor meet, competing against the pros, as well as many D1 runners, and he made the final in the 60-meter dash. And yes, he beat a bunch of D1 sprinters to get there. But Sam didn't even win the 200 at the D3 National Championship meet. That would be Chet Traore, and he ran 20.25, which would have fit in just fine at the D1 National Championship. Now, if I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, I was the type of recruit who was Division 1 or bust when I was in high school. I refused to listen to any D3 schools that reached out to me, which was a mistake. Haverford College was very serious about recruiting me, and I just blew them off. I actually threw that letter in the trash. Had I known that when I got to D1, that in their conference, the Centennial Conference, were also some D3 All-American sprinters, I might have reconsidered, but probably not. And later on, I raced against one of them, and I lost, which was not supposed to happen, because that race wasn't close. The truth without Photoshop is if you are not first-team national elite, probably in more than one event, then choosing to go D3 over D1 is probably going to be the difference between competing to win championships and perhaps never even getting invited to them in the first place in D1. And D3 only gets more competitive once you leave the sprinting events. The D3 national champion in track and field was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yes, MIT. They were the champions. Cause that school is known for a lot of things, but track and field show ain't one of them. Of course they were number 1 in their D3 region, but had they just moved up to D1 in the Northeast region, they still would have rated in the top 5. Keep in mind that they still don't give out any athletic scholarship, and ironically, the team that was in first in the Northeast region was Harvard, which is in the Ivy League, and they don't give out athletic scholarships either. But UConn, Syracuse, and the University of Rhode Island all do give out scholarships, and MIT was better than all of them. Don't get me wrong now. There are still some D3 conferences where a man can win a 100-meter dash without needing to break 11 seconds. But that is not the average, because the best conferences in Division 3 could swap out with some of the lower ones in Division 1, and nobody would notice the difference. Let's just be real with each other. If we swapped out Fairleigh Dickinson University for John Carroll University, you wouldn't care that much, because you still don't know which one is D1 and which one is D3. And when it comes to cross country, we know for certain just how good D3 teams actually are, because they face off with D1 teams at invitational meets. The best D3 teams would be very legit in D1, because schools like RPI and Johns Hopkins can beat schools like Rutgers, Ohio, Dayton, and Central Michigan that are all legit in D1.
So the idea that you need scholarship dollars to recruit a talented track team is a lie, no matter how you look at it. And speaking of scholarship dollars, D3 track and field is not quite what you think it is financially. Because even without athletic dollars, it doesn't affect the best teams in recruiting almost at all. Remember, even in D1, only a few athletes are getting full ride track scholarships. The best track teams will have about 50 men or women on their roster. Even a fully funded program only has between 12 and 18 scholarships to give out, so they ain't all getting full rides. And the truth about partial scholarships is it just means $1 or more of athletic aid. D3 schools that are public often have academic scholarships, which would take the place of what an athletic scholarship would have done anyway. And some of the top private colleges in Division III give so much financial aid that it comes out to be more than a partial scholarship, even to a D1 program. Anyway, it's actually how MIT recruited a national championship team, because they're a college that's hard to get into. But if they actually want you in the classroom and on the track, they will do whatever they have to get you. But the biggest lie of all is that you gotta go D1 to have the best chance at being successful in your track career. Cause if you're not getting recruited by the Texas Longhorns or any of their friends in the super conferences, your D1 experience is not what it's cracked up to be. Some D1 schools don't even have their own track to train on. And of course, there are many Division III schools that do have those resources. Moravian College in D3 has one of the best outdoor facilities in the entire Northeast, and they host a whole bunch of meets to show it off. And some D3 schools travel more and even spend way more money than other Division I counterparts. Nick Simmons is all the proof that you could ever need that you can succeed from anywhere. He was a D3 runner in the 800 who actually broke the D3 national record, but he also became an Olympian and a World Championship silver medalist. In any Division I region, there will be programs in Division III who can compete very well against you. My advice is really a warning. Don't sleep on D3 schools, either when you're being recruited or when you're competing against them. They might not have national television coverage, but almost nobody else does in D1 either. And if you are not careful, they will show up to your next college track meet and beat you, even without a scholarship to their names. And what most college coaches don't want you to know is most track teams across all divisions compete with each other at many of the regular season meets anyway. So whether or not you are D1, you can show up to a meet like the Texas Relays and see teams in other divisions, including junior college. They could very well end up in your heat, and they might even beat you. So the idea that you have to go D1 to compete against the best is a lie, no matter how you look at it. My advice is that you consider all of your options, even if they're not in D1, because some athletes will likely have recruiting options that look just as good, both on the track and for your scholarship dollars beyond it. D1 track and field may be an option, and it might even be the most appealing one, but it is not always the best one. Choose wisely, because even if you do get there, do not be surprised when a bunch of non-D1 athletes show up to compete against you at your next track meet.
If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore, because you are a real one. And if you want more from me beyond this video, on scarecruiting.com, you can get a ton of resources, like my free recruiting guide, online courses, and much more, including the option to meet with me one-on-one, where my specialty is helping you figure out which schools might actually be the best fit for you. And if nothing else, and you really just want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.